as always, with Tom Orr, and once a year with Matt Connolly from the state newspaper in Columbia, South Carolina. Matt, first off, how are you doing?
Doing well. Had a fun trip so far, even though it's obviously been very different, but been fun. Good to see you guys again, of course.
Tom, how are you doing?
I'm doing outstanding. If anyone was concerned that maybe the change of the new year would immediately improve everyone's situations all around the world, our first meal that we ate in this calendar year 2021, Tony and I, we ate standing on a street corner, eating omelets with our fingers, due to some DoorDash unpleasantness and tight time frames. So 2021's off to a rip-roaring start.
Yeah, maybe in like a lion, out like a lamb is what I'm hoping for. So, Matt, this thing that Tom and I do is early in the week, you're thinking we both pick Clemson to win, and then as the game gets closer, because we know the Buckeyes well, we know their potential, we start thinking, you know what, maybe the Buckeyes can get this done, and obviously they can win it, but you start to feel like maybe the chances are better.
Sure.
Is it the opposite way with you with Clemson, knowing that all of the potential that Clemson has, that maybe you feel like it's going to be even more of a win for Clemson?
That's a good question. I think I went into it thinking Clemson was going to win pretty easily coming into the week, and now I think it could be, like, I see a path for Ohio State to win. I see a path for it to be a closer game. I think just up front, I think Ohio State has the edge on both sides, or at least, at best case for Clemson, it's a toss-up. So I do think Ohio State's front is going to give Clemson some issues. That offensive line hasn't been really good this year other than the Notre Dame game. And then on the other side, Clemson's defensive front has been pretty good, but it's also young. You're relying on freshmen. There are a lot of guys coming in and out, and there's not necessarily a difference maker. So I like Clemson's matchups a lot at receiver. I think Clemson's defense has the edge in a lot of ways on the back end. Or I guess I should say with the front seven getting pressure and not letting Olave and Garrett Wilson get loose on the back end. So I don't know. I still think Clemson wins, but I do see a path, and I think maybe closer than I thought going into.
Did you put a score?
I think I did 42-30 Clemson. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm
Well,
at
thanks
right
a lot, Matt, for being on the show. I'm wondering about the receivers, because you got the fifth-year senior guy, and then you've got the true freshman in there,
EJ Williams. Yep.
Are these guys, because last year Ohio State's fourth and fifth year guys were okay. They weren't necessarily difference makers like Ben Victor and Austin Mack. They were just guys.
Right.
Like, outside of the guy in the slot, are these guys good? Or are they just guys? I think the freshman is going to be really good, but like, where are they?
So they're not like T. Higgins, Justin Ross, Mike Williams. Like, they're not 6'4", 6'5" guys that are blazing fast and going to go make crazy catches. But they're smaller guys who run good routes, have been around a lot, they know the system so well. They've played against so many defenses that they're smart players. They do a good job of running routes and getting open and reading coverages and that kind of stuff. So I think that's where, like I said, they're not like these crazy first-round talent draft picks, but they're just really good, solid, smart receivers. And then when you have a quarterback like Trevor Lawrence who's so accurate, but you only need a step or two, and he's going to make a play, or he's going to put the ball in a position where you can make a play. That's why they've had so much success. So, Cornell Powell and Amari Rodgers, both coming into this year, were guys that hadn't done a ton in their careers. They've been solid players, but had really been playing behind guys. Amari had started, but wasn't necessarily a difference maker. And then this year, they've really stepped up and been great. And EJ is a freshman who really hadn't done a whole lot all year. Like, he arrived, and Dabo was saying, this is a faster Justin Ross, which Dabo says a lot of things that you have to kind of take with a grain of salt. So we were kind of in wait-and-see mode with that. But yeah, against Notre Dame, he made a ridiculous one-handed catch that was just insane. And then he had another catch and long run after the catch and kind of weaved through the defense and scored a touchdown. So he's a guy that they feel good about right now coming into this game. Is kind of their number 3 guy.
Do you think they'd feel as good about him if they only had 6 games played at this point?
No, I don't. No, I mean, like I said, he hadn't done much all year until the Notre Dame game. And he had flashed some. I think it was Pitt. He caught an early touchdown, and he's made some tough catches. But he hadn't had more than, I think, 60 yards before the Notre Dame game. And then that was kind of his breakout performance, and I guess it came in game 11 or game 10, game 11. So no, they probably wouldn't feel as good if they were 6 games in.
Yeah, and that's, I guess, an interesting question is the Dabo is looking at it like Ohio State has this huge advantage because they've only put 6 games on film and they're fresher and they're less banged up.
Right.
And Ohio State's looking at it as, man, we would have liked to have played 4, 5, 6 more games. So you had those, you sort of knew what you had. I mean, we're coming into this covering the team. Normally during a normal year, it's like we come into this game and it's like, all right, we knew exactly what Ohio State has, where they're strong, where they're weak, where the vulnerabilities are, where there are guys who are maybe coming on. This year, we haven't seen the full Ohio State team basically since like week 1. Yeah. So I'm coming into this feeling like I don't know what they have and I don't know how much to expect them to have improved the last couple of weeks. So which side do you think has the advantage with the 11 games versus 6 game side?
Yeah,
who's better off?
So that's the other thing is like it's been 6 games, but it's not even been the same team for 6 games or even close to it. Yeah. So like it's really, I don't know, it's really what 1 or 2 games maybe where you've actually had most of your team. So I mean, yeah, I do think it's an advantage for Clemson that Ohio State's still trying to find itself, particularly defensively is where they seem to have had the most issues, and in the secondary in particular. So yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I think it's a disadvantage for Ohio State. And I think Clemson certainly knows a lot more of what it has. I mean, Cornell Powell going into the Notre Dame game, the first Notre Dame game, really hadn't done anything even this year, and then he explodes and has 6 catches for 150 yards. So I think that's when they really started trusting him more, and that was about the middle of the season. So yeah, I do think Ohio State, for them, it's an opportunity when you have a couple weeks to really improve and really try to make a big jump here at the end of the season as you're kind of getting some guys back too. So yeah, it very well could be a different Ohio State team than we've seen so far this year.
Because we've talked about in the past, Tom and I, how Game 6 for Clemson, I think, was like the Syracuse trailing or leading by like 7 points in the third quarter. Game 7 was like Boston College. Game 8 was a loss to Notre Dame. Clemson is a different team than they were then, and they've had that opportunity to get through these growing pains. And right now, I think you're asking Ohio State to just rub some dirt on those growing pains, get out there and go get the Tigers and see how it goes. I know they've been looking forward to this game a lot. Does Ohio State come up at all? Like, did it come up at all during the season? I don't think it would.
Really.
Yeah.
Not really, no. I mean, if anything, the LSU game was mentioned. Like,
yeah, exactly.
That's the game that y'all lost the season. It's what Trevor said really motivated him to really push for. I wouldn't say push for there to be a season, but it motivated him to push this off season to improve, to get better, and so he can make it back to the national title game and then make amends, so to speak, this time. So no, I mean, Clemson really. I guess I spend probably too much time on Twitter, but I definitely see like Clemson and Ohio State fans going back and forth on there, and so I do think that like it comes up. I think it comes up more with the fan bases for sure. Like I think that like definitely Clemson and Ohio State fans kind of enjoy the back and forth, but as far as the team and stuff, I don't really think it was thought of much.
Yeah, we have Clemson fans watching our streams quite a bit of late.
Yeah.
They're rambunctious, and then you get Ohio State fans in there. And
always mild-mannered Ohio State
fans.
Right.
Oh yeah.
They get treated poorly by these Clemson fans. I apologize.
I love both fan bases. I mean, I don't know. I think it's fun. Like I was really looking forward to this game. There's so many storylines, and Ohio State fans are a lot of fun. I've gained a lot of followers the last couple of weeks. I think just I've had fun interacting with those guys. So yeah, I was looking forward to it. I'm excited.
So Trevor Lawrence, you talked about him a little bit earlier, just in terms of like wanting areas where he wanted to get better. Where is he better this year than he was this time last year?
I think accuracy. I mean, he even against Ohio State, he struggled with his accuracy, and a lot of that was Ohio State's secondary and getting pressure, and then jamming the receivers at the line, and Clemson receivers had a hard time getting off. And I think Ohio State is probably going to try to do that again, even though I know it's a different secondary, but you have smaller Clemson receivers and the bigger Clemson receivers struggled with physicality some last year, so that would be my guess. But yeah, I think he's just more accurate. The LSU game last year to end it, he was just playing bad. Like he was missing open guys. I think Clemson went into that game knowing LSU was going to score some, and Clemson's offense was going to have to play really well to give him a chance, and he just didn't hit receivers. I don't know. I just didn't think he played well that game, and so I really think he's improved accuracy-wise. Even last year at the start of the year, a lot was made about his early interceptions and his early struggles and everything, and he really didn't have that this year. He's really been good from the start. He's actually been not as good down the stretch statistically wise. He's thrown a few more picks, but really all year he's been consistent. From the first game on.
Well, the interceptions last year I viewed as just him getting more control of the offense, being allowed to do more things and taking more chances, and then, of course, you find out what you can and can't get away with.
Yeah.
And then by the second half of the season, he was almost perfect in terms of the interceptions, and then this year you learn from that. And Justin Fields has kind of gone through that as well. You get a little bit more free reign, you make some bad decisions, and then you have to learn from those. But the Trevor Lawrence thing, I know Ohio State went in. They said they knew he could run. They've really learned it, and it was a lesson that they now believe that they know he can run. I'm still wondering how well they're going to defend that. He's starting to run more though, right? As the games, in the more important games, like we've seen with Ohio State quarterbacks of the past, he's running a little bit more, and he's still just as good.
Yeah, that's something Clemson's done really since Deshaun Watson was there. Is when they really need to win, and it's towards the end of the year, and the games are getting bigger, then they are going to run their quarterback more. They're going to lean on their quarterback to keep the ball in his hands, to go get the tough 3 yards if they need it on third down. A defense is going to naturally focus on Travis Etienne if it's 3rd and 1 or 3rd and 2, and so Trevor's going to keep more in those situations, more design runs, that kind of stuff. And yeah, I was listening to I think it was Pete Thamel's podcast with Jeff Hafley, and he was saying that they really weren't planning on the run at all last year, that he had gone back and charted all the games, and Trevor really didn't keep it and do many design runs. And I think that was because Clemson was blowing most teams out, and so they didn't do that a whole lot. But yeah, I think that's definitely going to be a part of Clemson's game plan today, and it's something you have to watch out for. And it's hard, right? Like, you can't take away Travis on the ground, Trevor running, Trevor throwing to receivers, like Travis out of the backfield. It's hard to account for everything. And so I think, if you could either have Trevor having an open receiver and like, what are you going to pick? Trevor beating you with his legs, or Trevor beating you with an open receiver who's winning in man coverage? So, and
he's accurate on the move too.
Yeah, he's really good on the run, so it's hard.
Yeah, and so having watched him for a few years now, what's the best way to defend him? I mean, you look at Justin Fields' numbers under pressure, and they're not great. So it's like maybe you blitz Justin Fields more than you might otherwise. Lawrence seems like he's more effective. He's not substantially less effective under pressure. But it's like you can't really sit back and let him pick you apart, because he's accurate enough, and he's going to go through his progressions diligently enough. So how would you defend Trevor Lawrence?
COVID.
They tried that earlier this year. Worked for Notre Dame. You might not get fooled by that one again.
I mean, I think like you have to play, unless you have elite corners like Ohio State did last year, where you could have those guys playing man. I think you have to play coverage, especially this year with Clemson's offensive line not being as good, and make Clemson beat you running the ball, and trust that your linebackers and defensive line, like Ohio State's defensive front, is really good. So I think you trust those guys to get off blocks and try to stop the running game, and then lean more in coverage. Is kind of what I would do if I was Ohio State in this game. Like, I wouldn't be throwing a ton of blitzes and stuff, just because then you've got Travis one-on-one out of the backfield with a linebacker, or you got somebody in the slot running open. So I think, in my opinion, I would probably try to play more coverage, trust my front four and linebackers to stop the run, and not throw a whole lot of blitzes. At least pick my spots when I'm going to blitz, and not just blitz every down, because he's really good at reading defenses and getting the ball where it needs to go.
Because we've talked about that, Tom and I, like, the way Clemson has not been running the ball this year, it doesn't seem like you'd need to put 8 in the box to stop it. Like, you could do it with 6 or 7 and then defend the pass with 4 or 5. I think that's the best way to go. Also, maybe trying to keep your eyes on the quarterback with maybe some zone, because when Trevor Lawrence takes off, or just being able to see the dump passes to Etienne and things like that, because I think it's outside where those two guys, especially Etienne, is going to hurt you more than maybe inside. And if they can run the ball against Ohio State, then nothing else really matters. But
and you got to tackle his. I mean, you've got to tackle Etienne in space, because they're going to throw him these swing passes, and he's going to be matched up with a linebacker or a nickel, and you have to make the tackle, because if you miss the tackle, he's so fast, he's so dangerous in the open field, it's going to be a big play. So I think a key is, like, if you're going to do that, you have to make the tackle when you have it there.
As the running game struggled, is it just because of the offensive line this year?
I mean, that's been a big part of it, especially the interior offensive line, which I think is the issue for Clemson, is because Ohio State's defensive tackles are really, really good. But it's also a situation where, like, I don't think Clemson's going to necessarily just, like, try to pound it up the middle on first down every play, especially if it's not working. Like, they're very good at kind of going with the flow and making adjustments as the game goes along. Tony Elliott being out, we'll see how much that changes things. Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, it's been a mixture. I think Travis has not been great at times. As far as, like, he's put the ball on the ground a couple times. The Notre Dame game in particular, the first time he had a really bad fumble in that game. So some of it's been him too, but the offensive line really just hasn't been opening up the holes the same way they did last year. And they've got 4 new starters up front, and guys that haven't played a lot, and there's really no depth behind them at all. They're relying on, like, freshmen true freshmen coming in as backups and stuff. So a lot of it's, I think, wear and tear on your body, not getting the rest or any of that kind of stuff too.
How much is the Tony Elliott thing going to really impact them today? I mean, he's their main play caller normally. Obviously, the game plan's in place. My thought is it doesn't necessarily impact them right off the bat. It might be more, okay, it's the second quarter, Ohio State has stopped whatever plan A was, like finding plan B, shifting to plan B, like that may be where it comes into play. But I mean, how is Clemson going to be operating differently during the game today, and how do you think it might impact the game?
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I think it's all about the adjustments. The second half adjustments that you're going to make is where you're going to see that. And, you know, Dabo, it's been interesting this week. Dabo is said that he and Tony normally collaborate a lot and do it together, which is not something that I don't think a lot of people thought or were, like, aware of, because I think, you know, at least I thought I was under the impression that Tony's calling most of the plays. I know Dabo has a call sheet and he's talking a lot, so, you know, I don't know. It'll be interesting, and I'm interested to hear from Dabo after the game, like, how much different was it not having Tony, and how much different, I guess, does he kind of handle things? How much more involved is he than normal? Because, you know, Brandon Streeter's a guy that's been an offensive coordinator before at a smaller level at Liberty and Richmond, but he's been an offensive coordinator before. He's a really good quarterbacks coach. He has obviously a great relationship with Trevor. And so, you know, he's a very capable coach, but obviously not having Tony is still a big loss.
Yeah, he's a really good quarterbacks coach. Let's remember, Trevor Lawrence was a 2-star player. Basically, so.
I mean, to be fair, Deshaun wasn't like number 1 overall.
No.
I mean,
Ohio State wanted him badly. Urban did.
Yeah.
He was a really good quarterback, and he was a 4-star quarterback, but he also did develop a lot under Clemson. I think got a lot better while he was there. So, yeah, Trevor's a little different scenario.
The Clemson defense, we've talked in the past about the defensive line and how young it is. Is that a product of the depth? Is it a product of, we know Brian Brescia is like the number 1 defensive lineman in the nation coming in, so I still think it's surprising when a guy steps in and starts. Is that a depth thing? Is that a him thing?
I think it's a little more of a him thing. I mean, so Niles Pinckney started like 13 of 15 games, I think, last year, and Brian had just came in and beat him out, really. And so he's moved into that starting role. And Niles is still playing a good bit, but he's really just kind of come in kind of the same way Christian Wilkins did, and Tyler Davis, and really earned playing time right away. And then the other guy is Miles Murphy, who I think a lot of people thought maybe even had a better year than Brian at defensive end. I think he leads them in tackles for loss and has forced a lot of fumbles. So he's a guy that I think you watch out for from, like, a pass rushing standpoint. Is Miles Murphy coming off the edge. He's a really good, really fast guy coming off the edge. He's only a freshman, but from a pass rushing standpoint, I think he's probably Clemson's best.
I was talking to an NFL scout a couple weeks ago, and he was telling me about Clemson. He's like, I was there, and I saw this big number 11, and I wanted to know who he was, and then they told me he was a freshman. I was like, well, I'll see you in 3 years.
Yeah.
Don't have time for you right now, but I'll see you. And then he just said, watch out for number 11, and yes, as I think everybody knows about it.
Yeah, and my question always with freshmen is, you know, you get the super talented freshman on the field. Can you take advantage of that somehow? You know, in terms of awareness, in terms of, you know, can you get them, you know, it's the first time they're in a playoff game. Are they a little too hyped up? You get out of your rush lane. You get a little too aggressive. You can dump screens over them. You run a, you know, counter trade. Just, have you seen any issues with them being, like, overly aggressive, or have they been pretty disciplined throughout the year?
They've been pretty disciplined throughout the year, but I mean, you make a good point. Like, this is a different kind of stage. It's, you the ACC championship was a big game, and it's a top 5 matchup, but still, this is a whole nother level. So it's definitely something, I think that you do have to watch out for and warn against in some ways. But no, those guys have really been consistent and been really good all year. So I don't think it's something Clemson's too concerned with going into it, but it is something you always have to be aware of.
How big of an issue is no Nolan Turner in that first half?
It's a big issue. I think safety is probably like the weak spot on Clemson's defense. If you had to pick one, they just don't have a lot of experience there outside of Nolan. And so you got Landon Sanders and Joseph Charleston, who will probably start, who have been okay this year. They've been moved in and out of games some. When Venables gets bad and he'll just yank them out of a game or whatever. We've had situations like that. It's obviously hard to do that when you don't have Nolan Turner. It's a big loss for sure. He's kind of like Skowski for the linebackers. Nolan is for the secondary as far as getting guys lined up. The fifth-year senior leader who is in charge of doing all that kind of stuff and really kind of the quarterback of that back group.
Yeah, that's the kind of the forgotten thing. People just think about, well, you just got to cover. You got to get the guys in front of you situated as well, and the backup has to know how to do that and do it as well as Nolan Turner, and that's just you just never know how that's going to go.
And it's also interesting because Brent Venables has been known to just like completely just come up with something that you're not expecting at all. So who knows if those guys will even be on the field. He may come out in a 3-2 whatever. 3-2-6 or 3-3. What
How much of that can you do in like 12 days now?
With him, I think a lot.
Yeah.
Like last year, they went into some games and just played 3-3-5 the entire game and just didn't use 4-down linemen. And then the next week they come out with 4-2, and I don't know. He just
does he get bored? He's like, this week I'm feeling this.
I think he really just does it on his personnel and then the personnel they're playing against, and just tries to do the best matchups he can. But yeah, he's as good as anyone at that.
Explain a little bit about how Venables kind of adjusts to what the opponent is doing. If you come up and line up and you check with the sideline, he's going to change what he's doing. He's known for disguising stuff. And explain a little bit about how he does that, and how does that mean Ohio State should go fast? Does that mean Ohio State should use motion how would you attack what he does?
Yeah, I think you have to do all of those things. Like if you just line up and try to run your plays, and he's watched enough film and knows enough about what you're going to do, that he's gonna probably stop it. So his memory, the film detail and study and everything he does as far as going back and watching, and one of my friends on the beat was making this example the other day when we were talking, is like Clemson played Louisville in 2017 and ran a play that Bobby Trino had run at like Western Kentucky or something, and it was like a play that Venables was ready for because he had seen it 4 or 5 years ago or whatever on film. Like he just goes so far back and does so much study that it's hard. So yeah, I think you have to try to do those things. You have to do the motions. You have to at times use tempo. I think tempo can be effective just because Clemson doesn't have time to see what you're in, to get lined up, to look to the side, to change the plays. You just kind of have to run a play and go with it. So it's definitely a balancing act. I think Ohio State used tempo at times last year, and they kind of backed off of it. But yeah, it's definitely something where I think you can have success. And obviously, Ryan Day's made it clear that he's aware of the sign stealing stuff and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's something that they'll try to guard against for sure.
I can't wait to see it, because Ryan Day has talked in the past about how they do have to use new signs each year because you lose different guys to different places, and they did lose one guy to Clemson.
Yeah.
And so that's something that you factor in before the season, but then now that you're playing them, you also have to factor in during the season.
Sure.
And it's just such a disjointed year, and then also you now have to figure out, well, what are we going to do? What are we going to change things up? And then you have to hope that everybody you've assigned to change things up is allowed to be on the sideline and doesn't get COVID. And
Right.
Ohio State has missed a bunch of coaches this year with that. So I think maybe
everybody
has had it, so now you don't have to worry about losing any of those guys, and then you can go on with your covert operations and your attempts to fool one of the best defensive coordinators in the country.
I will say one more thing on that is, though, like you can't. I just think that sometimes teams get so caught up in that they just kind of get away from what they're doing, and it's like so far in their head that they're just like worried about every little thing they're doing. So I don't think you can let it completely control your game plan. And like